We're live. Welcome, you guys. New year, and we're back. The threesome. We've been reunited, finally.
Should I start singing? What was that? Peaches and Herb?
Well, welcome to not Talking Saratoga. Excuse me. Welcome to the Saratoga Podcast.
Shame.
For our first show with all three of us in January 2023. It's so good to be back. So much has happened over the last month. I know we have a ton to catch up on. How are both of your New Year's going?
Adam, you've had a lot going on. I'm going to let you go first.
I had a lot going on. I spent New Year's in Kyiv, which was interesting. New Year's is almost bigger than Christmas in Ukraine, so it was very interesting to be in the city without lights. There were missile attacks that night, so that made it even more interesting. But I made it safely. We did a lot of good. I want to thank everybody who supported me, and I'm kind of happy to be back with my family living a normal life for now.
Where the biggest controversy is a bike lane.
Exactly.
Yeah, really.
Well, we're so happy that you're back safe and sound, and also always so appreciative of all the good work you're doing over there, and also keeping it forefront in our minds, back here in America where things are pretty peachy as compared to the situation the Ukrainians are facing.
Yeah. I mean, with our biggest problem, it seems everybody's got a secret file somewhere, huh?
I know. Just let the record show I have no confidential or secret
top secret
office. Everything's been shredded. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, Adam, how long were you over there? It seemed like you were there for longer than
almost a month.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, almost a month. Just this was the grand finale tour, I think.
Okay,
but go ahead.
And mostly in the Ukraine. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. This time we spent the majority of our time in Ukraine, kind of traveling. Kyiv was our hub, and then we would travel outside. We went to some really neat. When I say neat, I guess meaningful is a better word. But we went to an orphanage, went to a dog pound, and the biggest problem there, it's winter and there's no electricity. So we were able to deliver generators, heaters, disposable heat packs, rechargeable heat packs. So I think everybody does a little picks their lane in this conflict and helping Ukraine, and for everybody who supported me on us, I think our lane was pretty solid, and we helped a lot of people in meaningful ways. So
that's awesome.
That is really awesome. That you were able to do all that, especially the generators. They must be like gold there, huh?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of eerie to be. At night you walk around Kyiv and you just hear the hum of generators, and the streets are dark, but it's interesting. I talked to some people there. The hotels are slow, but the restaurants are busy. And a lot of restaurants you're there, or bars you're there, it's by candlelight. Now, luckily, Kyiv has a central heating system. So we were never without heat, but we were without electricity. We went some time without hot water, which was interesting. I had 7 days of clothes stretching to 14 days of clothes, which was interesting.
I'm sure you smelled delightful, Adam.
Yeah. I will say real quick, one last shout out. I did when we were over there. We had some Darn Tough socks donated to us. I went 4 days with a pair of Darn Tough socks, and you would never know. It's those socks. I'm grateful for what they did, but those socks are really some superior socks. I don't know the technology behind them, but everything else was pretty wonky by the end of that trip. But that was one pair of socks. They held up. So thank you, Darn Tough socks.
What kind of socks? Say it slowly.
Darn
Tough socks. They're made in Vermont. They donated like 250 pairs of socks. The majority of them went out front to the defenders of Ukraine, and it was funny. We got multiple responses like, "Hey, thanks for the generator." Blah blah. Wow, those socks are amazing. And so it's incredible what a good pair of socks can do. And again, this seems like a shameless plug, but it's really I'm a Darn Tough sock guy now, and I know you can order them online. I know you can get them in Vermont general stores, but they're definitely worth the investment. They're great socks. Well, especially if you're not going to be able to wash them you're going to be in them for a couple days.
I know what I'm going to be getting people for, birthday stocking stuffers for the next little while. I mean, that sounds like I'd love to support a local business like that, especially one that's been so generous with their, their product and helping you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Darn Tough. Speaking of darn tough, should we pivot into city politics, guys? Hard left.
Good segue. You get the good segue of the month award there.
Yeah, that was supernatural. So it's a new year. The city council that was elected last year is entering their last year, the end of their 2-year term. And there is, just as much dysfunction as there was in 2022, but we have the added kind of wrinkle of the fact that the election season is now starting, basically. And it seems super early. It's January, not even February. But this is actually when the local Republican and Democratic committees start interviewing people who are interested in running for office and giving out endorsements in February, and then the process starts. So it should be a really interesting next couple of months. And to that end, I would also say, if anyone's listening who is interested in running for office here in Saratoga, for any one of the city council seats or for the supervisor positions, contact your local Republican or Democratic committee. This is a time to get your name in and, make the change you want to see.
School board as well. School board elections.
School board as well. And actually, there was some really interesting school board news that I want to go over as well with you guys. Actually, should we start there since you brought it up?
Go for it.
So at the school board meeting, I'm going to forget the date. It was a couple weeks ago. The issue of SROs, school resource officers, and adding 2 additional school resource officers, primarily to focus on the elementary schools, which have no current SROs in them, came up and finally kind of came to a head at the last BOE meeting. For the last many years, 4 or 5 years now, this has been like one of the most contentious debates at the Board of Education, and between a faction of people who are very anti-school resource officers and having any additional police officers with a weapon on them in our children's schools, and a faction that is, in the polar opposite position and really wanted to see SROs in schools. So after several years of being completely deadlocked, the insurance company that our school district uses to come in and make safety recommendations made the recommendation this year of adding 2 additional SROs. And so after lots of heated debate and a ton of really impassioned public comment, the school board voted 5-4 in favor of adding these 2 additional SROs to our elementary schools. So I personally was delighted about it because I think that SROs have an incredibly positive impact on children. They're not there to make arrests. They're not there to be punitive. And they really stop a lot of problems before they start and connect kids to resources that they might need or develop issues before they bubble up into something that could potentially become violent. So I personally was thrilled, but it was a long time coming, and I was actually really surprised that it passed. John Ellis is one of the school board members, and he was kind of the swing vote, and he this time around voted in favor of the SROs. So there was a big development.
Yeah, I went to the school board meeting where the insurance company gave their presentation about the SROs, and the public comment. If you listen to public comment, we certainly Saratoga is not. We have our share of activists, and activism is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing, can lead to change, but there's certain people who that's their role in the city are activists. And speaking out against SROs, that's who you heard. You heard the same activists who show up at city council meetings. It's not necessarily parents, but more people who want to push a political agenda. The pro SROs, the voices, and the majority were pro SRO were parents like myself, parents like you two, and parents who just, our safety is the number one thing we can provide our children. And having an SRO there in the school, it's not a catch-all be-all. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it's certainly worst case scenario gives the best chance for a positive reaction. But also we heard a lot of good that comes out of SROs without worst case scenarios, the bonding they have with the children, the identification of potential problems before they become problems. So for me, SROs was a win-win. John, normally big union guy, sides. I would think more with the Democrats or the left than the right, but he put the city over politics and kids' safety. So he kind of went with what he thought was right. So thank you, John, and thank you for the other 4 board members who also voted for SROs because
they're needed. people know, it was Dean Colligan, Erica Borman, Connie Wyatowicz, Amanda Ellithorpe, and John Ellis who voted in favor, and Natalia Latakia, Tony Crackler, John
Brueggemann,
and who am I missing? Angie Amico? Yes.
Yeah.
Were the four who voted against. Dan, I really want to get your POV on this, but then I also have lots of comments about how this kind of debate happened. But go ahead.
Most of what I know about this, Robin, I've learned from talking to you and then Adam in the earlier months, as he said, he's attended the meetings. That vote was disheartening. Yeah, it went the right way, but 5-4 is disheartening. And I won't steal your thunder because you pointed out and I think you're going to point out again how they gave one reason, and then when that reason didn't work for them anymore, they shifted and came up with other issues. So that is disheartening. The three of us are pretty moderate in here. We lean conservative on a lot of issues, but we also lean to the left on some other issues. So I'm cognizant when it's talking about police and guns. I recognize I may have a bias, but to me, this issue of SROs, and again, all the great things the SROs do, the security is, although it's really number one in importance to safeguard the children, it's a small percentage of what they actually do in a day. And but yet that security is so important. And I just, a lot of things to the left, I hear them out. I recognize their points. And sometimes on certain issues, I agree with their points. But on this one, I just cannot fathom. It's just so counterintuitive to me why you wouldn't want a school resource officer in your child's school. Adam, to your point, probably most parents do. Not all, but most. And it's maybe the activists and that are sticking their nose in school because it's fertile ground.
Yeah, so, to me, this just means Saratoga in the greater school district. If you want, you have to at least pay attention and vote, because I think a lot of issues, if everybody's forced to vote, a lot of these issues would be no-brainers passed or not passed. But people just they kind of assume the next guy is paying attention. So,
guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, and you just cloned yourself.
Yes, and now you're gone.
There was a glitch in the matrix with Robin there.
Yeah.
There's a serious glitch in the matrix. I think I am up twice. I don't know how or why.
Robin, do you know how many people in Saratoga Springs are horrified that there's now 2 Robin Daltons?
I'm sorry.
No, there's 3. There's going to be 3, Adam. She's frozen. She's going to come back in.
Yeah,
I don't know what's happening. Yeah. So I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on with my Wi-Fi connection, but if I may, I wanted to point out kind of some of the frustrating points of this debate and why I found it to be so personally irritating. So the 4 members of the school board who voted against the SROs all campaigned saying that they were not against SROs, that their number one priority was following the recommendations of the insurance company when they did this security audit of our school district, and that they followed those recommendations, and they weren't anti-SRO and they weren't anti-law enforcement. And then, push comes to shove, and we have this year's safety audit, which recommends 2 additional SROs. And suddenly the argument was, well, we really shouldn't be discussing this now because it's not budget season, and we should really only be discussing things that have to do with additional revenue or, adding additional people during budget season. And so that was kind of the rationale they had to try to kind of kick it down the road. Other members of the school board pointed out that they had hired people, added people, done things having to do with the budget outside of the budget season. It's a fairly regular occurrence. And then also the public comment was frustrating for me as well, because really people were only talking about this, like 90% of the comments were all in the context of a school shooting situation. And to me, obviously a school shooting situation is unfathomable and like your worst nightmare, but it's also the least likely thing that's going to happen that would require an SRO in our schools. And so I think just putting a little more kind of like day to day what our SROs do and the problems they can prevent would have been a better way for people to express their sentiments about this. But, we also have an SRO in our high school. We have 2 SROs in the middle schools, and the Board of Education has no problem with that. Everyone speaks, so highly of them, from the students to even people who are coming to public comment against SROs would say, except for Officer Barrett, we love Officer Barrett. So we have SROs in our middle school and high school, and yet our youngest children, who are the least prepared and least knowledgeable about what to do in the event of, say, a shooting, are the ones that don't have the SRO, on campus. And to me, that's just, there's no way to make that argument logical, to prevent SROs from being in the elementary school, or to kind of fight back against this audit by using the budget excuse. It was really disheartening. I expect better from people who we elect to serve to represent our students and administration on the school board.
These elections and the school board elections, God bless anyone that sits on a school board.
Yeah.
It's, you talked about how little you got paid, Robin. They get paid nothing. I'm sure they're taking calls at 9:30 at night and things like that. But at the same time, they do have a duty to represent the people and the students and everything. And it just seems like they're, at least in some cases, their politics are taking over their duties.
Well, it's been the same group of people who have been serving now for a couple of years, and I think they're just all very entrenched in their positions. The positive way to look at it, I would say, is that we have a community that are all incredibly passionate about the safety of our children. And although we may see that as happening through different mechanisms, everyone's really committed to it. And, in my opinion, we should be doing everything possible to ensure our children's safety, whether it's SROs, more mental health services, everything that was suggested should be acted on to do our best to keep our schools as safe as they can be.
Robin, let me ask you a question. And so now that we have SROs, let me play devil advocate a little bit. As far as, SROs, for people who don't know, are trained police officers, right? They're not security guards.
Active duty, yeah.
They're active duty police officers. So, theoretically, they have the utmost training in firearms. But the SROs now currently, they do wear traditional police gear, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if there's and these are the debates we should be having, right? Is there something saying, all right, I understand that they should be carrying a firearm, but can we tone down the outfit or something? Can we tone down and would that have a meaningful impact? As far as addressing some of these concerns of police officers can be intimidating. So it's kind of a. So children who grew up, maybe without the best impression of police officers, it's a softer blow to them. Is that something we should be talking about?
So, I think it's really interesting you brought that up, because one of the compromises I was kind of brainstorming, which wouldn't really work out in real life because of contractual reasons, I would guess, is that I thought maybe for elementary schools to reach an agreement, the SROs would leave the firearm, not bring their firearm, but have all of their other, tools, such like their taser, pepper spray. They have, several other mechanisms that they can use in the event of an attack or to stop, a dangerous situation. And I thought maybe that was a compromise we could reach, although it probably wouldn't have been approved by the union. But I thought, those were the kind of things I was brainstorming as well. Adam.
Right. I would disagree, thinking I think the firearm is the most important thing they should have on them, but maybe not the other things. But again, these are kind of the moderate, centrist conversations that I think we should be having, because it's, at the end of the day, the pros, I think we, far outweigh the cons. So, but how can we make it the best possible solution?
The thing about the gun, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I did do a lot of research into this. And the one thing I really relied on was the FBI did a report on school safety and school shooting incidents over the span of about 10 years. And the percentage of times that a school shooter was stopped by an SRO with a gun was like 0.3%. It was like next to nothing.
Yeah, but if it's once, right?
I'm just saying, if say we were deadlocked, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To me, that was a palatable compromise. But we also heard extensively from our current SROs and they really talked about how they connect with kids who they know are uncomfortable, intimidated, or fearful by a police presence. And they used examples that I thought were, they seemed tiny, but they were really kind of meaningful to me. Like one of the SROs was saying that he carries like a Nerf football with him when he's walking up and down the halls. And if he sees a kid or a group of kids coming that he knows might feel uncomfortable around his presence, he literally tosses them the football and they toss it back. And it's just like a little way to connect.
Yeah.
It's important to note, if I could just say, and you know the SROs better than me, but I do know the officer a little bit. He's seemingly everywhere. I see him at the working the track. I see him working the schools, and police departments know the average police officer or some police officers just aren't right for that position, and some are. You don't want Tackleberry. Remember Tackleberry from the Police Academy movies? You don't want the 6'5" linebacker that's harsh with people. And a lot of police agencies have that. They've got the people that are better at doing certain things. So they usually pick the right person to be the SRO.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Dan, because actually Officer Barrett in particular, and actually all of the SROs specifically wanted this job because they wanted to work with kids, and they get extra training to be able to do that effectively. But these are all people who really want to be in schools helping our kids. So it's not like they're being just randomly assigned this position.
And they often have kids in those schools themselves.
Yeah, and it shows in their work. And also, just from a staffing and budget perspective, in Saratoga, we obviously have our biggest public safety needs in the summer. And so to have an active duty police officer who during the school year is in our schools, but then in the summer is free to help us where we need it the most, which is downtown, foot patrols, et cetera, is really kind of like a winning combination for this city.
Absolutely. Well stated.
So I see, I can't think of a smooth transition like I did before, but I see that I think we have Ed Lindner joining us. And I want to bring him in because I want to do a little left turn and talk bike lanes. Let me see. Ed. Oh, I see him. I don't see him yet. Do you see him?
Well, the screen popped up, but it's blank.
All right, I'm going to take him off for a second. We'll kind of set up this next topic we wanted to talk about. So people who have lived in Saratoga for even like a year or 2 or 3 know that the issue of bike lanes sparks an outrageous amount of controversy in the city. It brings out a lot of passion for people on both sides. And it's not really something the city has ever been able to tackle effectively to date. We have a few little bike lanes. We have one on Lake Avenue that I think is actually atrocious and something I wanted to talk to Ed about. We have one on North Broadway, but we really lack any connectivity. And we also have a really passionate and dedicated group of people who run Bikeatoga and who are on our Complete Streets Committee, who are advocating for increased bike lanes and increased, walkability, connectivity, et cetera. And so there has been a proposal to put bike lanes on Union Avenue. And I believe as
part of a much larger effort to reform Union Avenue in many different ways with more crosswalks and so forth, correct?
Correct.
And beautification and functionality and so forth.
Union Avenue being one of like our oldest, streets in the entrance to the city, it's actually like extraordinarily wide. I think it's like something like 70 feet wide. So, one of the issues that we've had in the past with bike lanes is that streets simply aren't wide enough. There's like a mandated amount of distance that needs to be in place for the state DOT. And, to get around that and put bike lanes in, if it's not wide enough, means you're taking people's front yards. So Union Avenue, just by virtue of how wide it is, does really lend itself to this kind of a project. But naturally, there are people who have come out very, vehemently against it. And I believe, Dan, you said there has been a group that's formed, correct?
There is the Historic Union Avenue Neighborhood Association. It was John Kaufman's blog. He was the one that first noted that they have been formed, and they may be able to join us next week. And they're, one thing one of the members pointed out to me is they're not against this plan. They said with Union Avenue being such an important part of the city, they want it done right and properly and so forth. So I won't steal any more of their thunder, and I won't speak for them anymore. But we think we can have one of them on next week.
I still see Ed down here, but I'm not seeing his face. Dan, you want to
maybe he just wants to talk to us and doesn't want to be on camera?
Ed, can you hear us?
No, I just tested my camera. I think it's on. I don't know why I can't see me either.
Well, man of mystery, Ed Lindner, do you want to start this conversation or with no image, or do you want to? We could try to remove you from the stream and put you back in again and see if
whatever works for you guys. I'm happy to talk bike lanes. And actually, one of the things that might be useful. Can you still hear me? I thought you froze there for a minute.
The connection is not on my end.
And that may be why we can't see you. The connection is really bad. You sound like you're on almost a shortwave radio.
All
Ed,
right.
can we?
Why don't
we
you
have-
kick me out and I
Yeah.
will come back in and see if we can do
Okay.
better.
Perfect.
Ed, Ed, if you can still hear me, if you're on your phone, try your computer and vice versa.
And Chrome is the best web browser, which
I
hopefully.
forgot to tell him that.
Honestly, Dan, get it together, buddy. I'm thrilled to have Ed join us. Ed is someone who I worked with while I was in office on the city council, specifically talking about bike lanes and coming up with, I think, what has been needed for a really long time, which is kind of a master plan of how the bike lanes, how we're going to build out bike lanes in the city such that there is connectivity and they're serving, a function. They're getting people from point A to point B and not like the Lake Avenue bike lane, just kind of like depositing them in Nowheresville. So he's been a tremendous advocate for complete streets and bike lanes. And I think he's back, but Ed?
I'm trying to load through Chrome for you.
Oh, your audio sounds like a million times better. Yes. Although you're still a man of mystery, and we're not seeing your video yet. But
if we have to, I think we should just continue audio if we can't get them up, right?
Yeah, Ed, do you mind jumping in, even though we're not seeing you?
No, because actually, what would be useful is if you could put up one of the slides that I sent to Dan, particularly the Mike King slide that shows Clark Street.
I think that's what I just put up. Yes.
That is my old home. I had the very top front center with the balcony at 56 Union. What a nice rendering of 56 Union.
So Ed, tell us what we're looking at.
Well, this is a rendering done by a guy named Mike King, who's on the Complete Streets Advisory Board. And we're actually really lucky to have Mike. He is an internationally recognized expert on creating streetscapes with cars, bikes, and pedestrian crossings. He has done projects like this on 5 continents. More than 64 cities have paid him to do the sort of visioning thing that he's doing here for us for free. He moved here in the summer and he's jumped right in, and we get the benefit of that. So he's working with the city consultants, JMT, on a plan. But a number of things that you see in this, and there is a bike lane over there on the right. It won't be green. It will be something more appropriate to Union Avenue. But as you can see, it's really just a small part of the whole project. The first thing you see. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask you a quick question? So in this rendering, it's different than what we have on Lake Avenue in that, if I'm correct, the bike lane is the kind of the innermost, like it's bike lane, and then there's the median with trees, and then traffic lanes and so forth. So the bike lane is really physically kind of removed from the traffic lane by the strip of trees and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This is a protected bike lane. So if you look to the tree on the right, you'll see to the right of that there's a bike lane, and then to the right of that there's more green space and the existing sidewalk. So this is intended to reconfigure this street to slow down cars, because just this design alone will make cars drive slower than the 2-lane speedway that we have now. The pedestrian crossing there, you've got a curb extension or a bump out, which takes away 1 parking space, but the rest of the parking spaces would remain. But instead of having to race across 4 lanes of traffic at Clark, you can cross to the median across 1 lane, and then cross to the median across, again, 1 lane again. So pedestrian crossings, much, much safer. But it's also safer for drivers. If you're coming out of Clark Street trying to make a left on Union, we've heard from, yeah, exactly. Again, you've got 4 lanes of traffic, or at least 3 you have to deal with, people traveling quickly. The taking away the 1 parking space there creates a much better sight line, because you won't have that car right up against the intersection. You're only coming across 1 lane of traffic before you get to sort of a no man's land there by the median. So you can pause there and make your turn. So slower traffic, better sight line, and an opportunity to pause if there's oncoming traffic is going to make it a lot easier to pull out.
I will say speeding is, when it's not track season, people coming off of 87 tend to just fly down Union, and it is incredibly, precarious to try to cross the street anywhere along Union. But what I think I'm most thrilled about in this rendering is the way the bike lanes are protected, because that had always been my biggest kind of gripe about what happened on Lake Avenue. And I think actually the Lake Avenue bike lanes have kind of, soured people on what bike lanes could look like in Saratoga, because they're not envisioning something as safe as what this rendering is portraying.
To be clear, Ed, on the rendering, is what is proposed by the city in this plan, or are they not that far? Or is this just an idea that was put out of what it could be? I guess maybe you said that, and I'm sorry if I missed it.
No. It is, sort of a rendering of a proposed design. It's not the final design. And actually, one thing we should tell your listeners is that the city will be having a design workshop on February 9th, 6 p.m. I believe it's going to be in the music room in City Hall, where there'll be an opportunity to break down into smaller groups and talk with the consultants about what you like and what you don't like, because there's a lot to discuss here. And I certainly agree with the Union Avenue homeowners that we need to get this right. What I like about this, I love the bike lane, of course, but I love the trees. One of the things that makes Union Avenue iconic, and if you look back at all the old photographs, you always see that tree line that runs down both sides of the avenue. And we can recreate that visually here. That green space there is wide enough that you can put in real trees. The trees on Union Avenue in the stretch from Clark to Circular Street, some of them are a little crowded. There's not a lot of space there for them to work with. So all of those things could happen in this design. What most people notice is that instead of 4 lanes, there are 3 lanes. And that's the subject of, I think, understandable concern, because the question is, when the track gets out, how's that going to be handled? And if you can put up the other slide, maybe we can talk about that.
And while she's doing that, a quick question. This workshop on February 9th, anybody can show up and be part of this process?
Absolutely. Please come.
One thing I'll shoot in on this is that I live about a block away from that crosswalk, and my mother lives about a block on the other side of Union. So we use that crosswalk a lot. And something that, and I don't know if it's New York drivers or American drivers, but they don't really respect the crosswalk like they do in other places. I've seen, when I've been in Europe.
Yeah.
What's that?
Not at all.
No, they'll slam on the brake. I mean, I stood on that crosswalk and just cars are whizzing by with no, there's no respect for that. So kind of, I really like this plan and the idea of kind of forcing drivers to slow down, to respect the crosswalk. The same thing with the bike lane on Lake Ave. I think part of the big problem is Saratoga, New York, American drivers are not accustomed to these lanes and these crosswalks and to properly respect them. And that makes them, if you're a pedestrian and you're in the right, it doesn't really matter if you get run over, right? So kind of forcing the driver's hands and really making it evident of they should be slowing down and respecting the bike lanes are protected and the crosswalk looks more prominent. So that's a good thing.
You bring up a good point, Adam, and it's interesting because people don't necessarily notice this here, but when you make car travel lanes narrower, cars slow down. We're all guilty of this. You find yourself on Union Avenue, it's wide and it's straight, there's nothing coming, and you just start going a little faster than you might. If you see something like what we just showed you on Clark Street and you see that there are curb extensions coming out, people slow down. And that's been demonstrated in cities around the country. That's not really up for debate. If you narrow the travel lanes, people will drive slower.
Ed, what are those? What are the kind of bump outs called? Where
They're
you're
called bump outs or curb extensions.
Okay,
bump outs or curb extensions. But that's some same sort of idea. And then the median, but the part where you extend it to put a little island for the pedestrians, that's the median tip. You may hear that.
The bump out to me is something that we could use in so many intersections downtown. For like crossing Lake Avenue from the Parting Glass over to the Hampton Inn, for example, where you've got both sides of Lake Avenue coming downhill and people fly. And like Adam said, people do not respect pedestrian crossings. And so trying to get across there is extremely difficult. But I think those bump outs are really incredibly helpful. So right now we're looking at the second rendering. So this
rendering, you're at Regent Street roughly, and you're looking towards the park. and you're seeing one lane of traffic in each direction. There's parking on both sides. On the left there, that's not 2 lanes of traffic. The white car is traveling in the car lane, and then the black car is parked. So it's that same sort of idea where you have street parking, but then it bumps out a little bit at the crosswalks.
So this is essentially Lake Avenue with just the bike lanes on the other side of the parked cars, essentially, correct?
I'm sorry.
This is essentially what we have on Lake Avenue. We have
no. This is the same sort of plan. If you look to the right, you'll see a cyclist on a protected bike lane.
Oh yes,
to the very right.
I meant with like the traffic lanes. Like on Lake Avenue, we have 1 lane of traffic in each direction, a turning lane. But
yes. Oh yes.
Yeah. And
yeah, the city actually has a number of these. There's one on Lake, there's one on Church, there's one on South Broadway. West Avenue, which has a ton of traffic, works the same way. They work fairly well. And so I can tell you that there are fact sheets that you can find from the Federal Highway Administration or the AARP that talk about road diets. That's what this is called. Go ahead and Google AARP road diet. Road diet. You're making it go from 4 lanes to 3.
Oh, it's getting skinnier. I get it.
Yeah, there you go. And one thing I've learned in my reading is that the first time someone hears about a road diet in their neighborhood, they absolutely hate it. They absolutely hate it. The Washington Post did an editorial just 2 weeks ago talking about Alexandria, Virginia, where they said the opposition to the road diet was apocalyptic. 11 neighborhood associations that had never united to agree on anything all opposed it.
Now, Ed, will we look thinner on the road diet?
Yes, I'm guaranteeing that. If you build this, you're all going to look thinner.
Excellent.
But what they found in Alexandria was, guess what? When they built it, crashes were reduced by 41%. One of the biggest causes of, go ahead.
I was going to say people are resistant to change, just going to be resistant to change often, and it can be frustrating. And let me tell you, so this obviously is going to require funding. Has there been any thought or talk about where that funding would come from?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways to go. I think, and it's a multiple stage process. Obviously, the city needs to have some skin in the game, but there is a state, what do they call it?
Grant?
Something route. Sorry, I forgot what the name of the grant is, that the city has already gotten. They're using some of that money. The state touring route grant, The state touring route grant, the city is using some of that money for Grand Avenue. And there's, of course, a lot of money in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is a great time to try to build bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Because there's also a climate aspect to this. Sustainable Saratoga, a number of environmental groups in the city are big supporters of the Complete Streets Bike Network because you need to make bike travel an actual alternative. Robin was talking earlier about the lack of connection, and that's a real problem. You don't drive your car on streets that don't go anywhere. Why should you ride your bike on bike lanes that end halfway to town? Studies show, and it's common sense, when you make a full network, when you make it comfortable for people, families with kids or seniors with e-bikes, people who aren't comfortable riding in traffic, then usage goes up. And, there's a whole lot of trips that we all take 5 miles or less to run to the store that you could and would enjoy doing on a bike if it were safe to do it. So.
And, Ed, I think there's so much conversation about affordable housing and getting more affordable housing in the city. And I think one of the things that people always kind of miss in that conversation is that has to come with access to transportation that doesn't involve owning a car. And so I think this really kind of goes hand in hand with, we have CDTA, but that's not sufficient. This just gives another alternative to folks who don't necessarily own a car, which I think is terrific.
And even for families that do own one car. I mean, you have families where both parents work. One parent takes the car to work and picks up the daughter from soccer practice. The other parent rides a bike. The issue with trying to find workers in Saratoga Springs. It's very expensive for people to live here and still work in those kinds of jobs, but they do work in the neighboring communities. So if we make it safe for them to cycle in from Wilton or from Boston Spa, I think it improves the workforce pool in terms of trying to find good quality employees. So let me talk about this road diet, just one thing so people know what they're looking about. So you see there's one lane going towards the park and then the center turn lane. when you leave the track now, we all know it's not great. You get into a line of cars, people in the left lane, they're stopping to turn left on Nelson, they're stopping to turn left on some of the side streets, even turning right, there's pedestrians. When you get to Circular Street, it's 2 lanes, right?
Yep.
The left lane goes left, the right lane goes right. There's a traffic light, and the reason it backs up is because when you make a right turn onto Circular Street, you go a short way and then you try to make a left. There's no signal there, not a left turn signal. I mean, that's what we have now. It's not great. The road diet will not make things worse, and there's a chance it will make things better. And that's been shown in a number of places because it cuts down on the number of times people stop for people who are making a left turn. But if you see nothing else, see that if you're at Regent Street and you're trying to get out of the track, right now you'd have 2 lanes of traffic heading to Circular Street. And in this plan, you're going to have 2 lanes of traffic heading to Circular Street. The right lane is going to turn right, and the center turning lane all the way down is going to turn left. So I want to see the traffic studies. I want to see the consultants explain this to people in a way that they will understand. But road diets around the country have been very successful. And
is there still a sidewalk on the south side there, or the right
there's
side?
a sidewalk on both sides, yes.
Yeah, so there's a grass median between both, right?
Yeah, so if you look at the left of this picture, you see pavement, then greenery, then a bike lane, and then on the left, there's a sidewalk there on the other side of the street lamp.
That's
and
awesome.
It's a little harder to see on the other side, but the sidewalks absolutely maintain. One of the things Mike King, who I described earlier, likes about Union Avenue is the beautiful sidewalks. We're not losing those.
Well, I just have to say, I feel like this for me just addresses so many of the issues I had with the one bike lane that is, most visible at Lake Avenue. The safety concerns are addressed. And also Lake Avenue seems to handle a ton more traffic than Union Avenue does in the off season. It's a truck route. It's very congested, but it's not, you're not sitting in traffic jams, and they have the same kind of layout of the lanes as what we're looking at right now. So,
I'll speak up a little bit in defense of the Lake Avenue bike lane. I ride it all the time because it goes to my house, and so it is actually useful to me. I understand why it was built at the time. It was that let's get something done and start to see if we can build this network. You can't build a network unless you start by building one piece at a time. But I think everyone would agree if we had the money, it would be better for that to be a protected bike lane. It's functional the way that it works now. It would be better if it's protected. But honestly, I do ride it all the time. And one of the great things about bike lanes that actually makes drivers more comfortable is that everybody knows where they're supposed to be.
Well,
one of the things that Fritz, go ahead.
I don't know about that on Lake Avenue, only in that it is so poorly marked, the bike lane, that, it's a single white strip. The markings that had initially been put down indicating it was for bikes have long since faded. And to me, it's just incredibly dangerous situation. It makes me nervous to know that you're using it. But it was also really pitched when it was rolled out for kids who are traveling to Lake Avenue or Caroline Street, Elementary, or St. Clemens. And I mean, I don't know a single parent that would let their kid ride down that bike lane. So anyway, my point.
You'll never get an argument from me for making a bike lane better. Clearly, a protected lane would be better. But I will say, if people are interested, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, NACTO, just Google all ages and abilities design. They have a wonderful design guide for building bike and pedestrian infrastructure for all ages and abilities. And one of the things they say is, there's a lot of riders out there who say we don't need bike lanes because I can ride in traffic. Most of my Bikeatoga friends can ride in the city now. We're not building the bike lanes for middle-aged men in Lycra. We're building bike lanes for families with kids, seniors with e-bikes, people who just aren't comfortable riding in traffic. And there are a lot of them. You're welcome.
Is it you should that's a great quote, middle-aged men in Lycra.
It's not mine. It's been around for a while.
Okay. I like it. One quick thing.
The only reason that doesn't apply to me is the middle-aged part, I'm afraid.
Well, we can't see you, Ed. So, as far as anyone can tell, you're like a spring chicken over here.
Yeah. Well, that's an advantage.
Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and Ed, I we know you're not an official spokesperson for this Union Avenue project, but just to frame it up, state DOT is doing their own project from I believe Henning to East Avenue. That's already in the works, and the city is picking up the rest of the Union Avenue essentially from east to Congress Park or to Circular. Is that a fair way to frame up what's going on Union Avenue?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. I mean, Bikeatoga's mantra is no more half bike lanes. The state of New York is going to pave Union Avenue, as you said, from Henning Road to East Avenue, because that's state jurisdiction in the outside district. And they're going to put in a 5-foot paved bike lane. So we need to continue that all the way to the park. I mean, if you look at a map of the city, fully a third of the city landmass is east of the Northway. I have friends out there who ride in on Union all the time. It's not that safe, but that's because it goes from their house to downtown. So it's an important route. It's part of the city's complete streets plan. And yes, we're asking the city to finish the bike lane on their portion of Union that the state is starting.
Ed, what would be awesome is, I don't know if there's plans for this, but to be able to go then across to East Avenue and connect down to the new, downtown connector trail on Excelsior would be fantastic as this kind of develops.
Well, it's in the city's complete streets plan to do just that. Again, you build the network one piece at a time. This will be an important east-west piece, but one of the things that excites me about this is the opportunity to connect through the park across Broadway to the west side.
Yeah.
And there is a plan to connect on Congress Street, and then there's a lot of, it hasn't been engineered, so I don't know which route they'll choose. But the idea would be to connect from there to Railroad Run.
Yeah.
Railroad Run, wow, it gets better. If you connect Union Avenue through the park to the west side to Railroad Run, you're in the Spa Park.
Yeah.
The Saratoga County right now is putting together plans, I've seen them, to connect the Zim Smith Trail from Ballston Spa to the southern end of the Spa Park.
Wow.
And the Zim Smith Trail runs all the way to Mechanicville, where it connects with the Empire State Trail, 750-mile trail that runs from New York City to the Adirondacks to Buffalo. So that if we do our part here in the city, we build Union Avenue and we build this connector to Railroad Run, someone could leave Midtown Manhattan on their bike and they could ride all the way to downtown Saratoga Springs and out to Saratoga Lake. That's what I want to see.
Now it sounds like you're describing the guys in the Lycra again. I got to tell you.
Well, you'll be surprised. I've gone on a number of long distance rides, and they're mostly older couples.
No, I'm
teasing. And you know what? That wouldn't be the first time that's happened. One of the first bicycle tourists in America, a guy named Wentworth Rollins, wrote a high wheel penny farthing from 59th Street and 8th Avenue to Saratoga Springs in 1879. That's before the two-wheel bicycle was invented. Wow. There's stories about him in the New York Times and the Saratogan. He stayed at the Grand Union Hotel. He saw all that could be seen from the back of a bicycle around Saratoga, according to the papers. So one of America's first bicycle tourists came here, and I would like to see more of them.
Very, very cool. Well, Ed, we have a pretty hard out at 1:00, and I want to thank you so much for your time and coming on and, letting people know about this exciting project and giving them the opportunity to weigh in as well as it's being, the plans are being finalized. So we really appreciate your coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for coming. We need more renderings on here. We need more artwork. We need more visual aids for our viewers, like what we have on the screen right now. We should do that.
Well, Dan, if you would learn how to upload the PDFs like I do, we could have visuals all the time.
I did my part. I got them to you. Here you go, Robin. Figure it out.
So look, I just had a 6-year-old intruder invade my office. And I know we have to wrap up. Do you want to do a quick cheer and jeer for the week before we go?
Yes, I've got a special thank you I want to start off with.
All right, go for it.
Are you doing your graphic, your fancy dancy graphic?
My fancy dancy. Oh my God, I've really missed it. Yeah, let's do it. Why not, right? Here we go. Oh yeah, look at that. Wow. All right, Dan, what do you got for us?
Okay, it's kind of a long cheer, so I'll forego the jeer this week. back on January 15th, Robert Millis, who you know from a lot of things, most recently envisioning and with a lot of help creating Saratoga Springs New Year's Fest. Him and I did a charity football watch game with the Buffalo Bills when they were still in the playoffs against Miami on the 15th. It was held at Putnam Place. And it went really well. And I want to thank really quickly, I'm going to thank a bunch of people. Certainly Robert for reaching out to me. It was his idea. It was a great idea. The Putnam Place, Sly at Putnam Place, they hosted. They had a beautiful big screen TV. It was great for watching a party. There wasn't a bad seat in the house. The Franklin Community Center, we raised funds for them as well as the Buffalo Bills Foundation. Franklin Community Center had volunteers there working the door, and I appreciate that. Rory at DeAndrea's Pizza at a very reduced price fed the people there, and they were hungry, trust me, because we did a few runs. And Jeff Vukalek and Abby from Saratoga Eagle, they donated some raffle items that the Franklin Community Center was able to raise some funds raffling off. And a young man by the name of Benjamin, I won't say his last name because I don't have his parents' permission, was sent over from Jim Montanino's office. Benjamin is an intern in the office to help out. And boy, did we put him to work. He ran to DeAndrea's carrying chicken wings and pizzas like 3 or 4 times. And we'd hand him we'd hand him some money and say, go get that latest round of pizzas. So he was great. I'm probably forgetting somebody. I'm sorry, but it was a positive thing. It was a wonderful thing. We raised over $1,300. Most of it went to the Franklin Community Center. Some of it went to the Buffalo Bills Foundation. All of it went to the two of them combined anyway, every last dime of it. So excellent. So that's it. That was a positive. It was fun. And I'm done.
Adam, you're up. That was a great cheer. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, mine's going to be a little more international just because I've been out of town, haven't been following what's going on in Saratoga so much. But the war in Ukraine has kind of hit a stalemate right now with the lines are dug in and Russia's making small intermediate gains by sacrificing a lot of soldiers' lives. But what Ukraine really needs is tanks and Western tanks to kind of make this last great push and kick Russia off their land. So my first cheer, and there was a big debate on what kind of tanks, and the Leopard 2 tanks are Leopard 2, 3, and 4s. Those models produced by Germany are really the best tanks for Ukraine. And Germany was dragging their feet because a country like Poland has these Leopard tanks, but because of the agreements, can't give them to Ukraine without Germany's permission. So cheers. Poland came out and said, we're giving them to Ukraine regardless. They need these to push back this tyranny. So cheers to Poland for just giving Ukraine these Leopard tanks. But recently, as of yesterday and today, a kind of coalition has been formed. There's like 30 different countries now that's going to be giving Ukraine Western weapons, specifically main battle tanks. The United States is and it hasn't been announced yet, but I follow all the chatter. It's going to happen. Are giving the Abrams tanks to Ukraine. What's that?
Adam, I think it was announced like in the past 20 minutes. I saw something flash on my screen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So
which are like the most the highest power tank you can possibly have, correct?
Yeah. Well, the Abrams tanks, they're like they're very complex. That was the argument. Germany said, we're not going to give the Leopard tanks before the America acts. They're kind of in an America act first. And America said, the Abrams tanks aren't really best suited for Ukraine because they're so complex. It's like it's a jet engine they use it's like a 700 miles from Poland to the front line right now. And these tanks would have to be serviced in Poland. But anyway, it's going to happen now. So, these countries are releasing these Western tanks. They're really going to have an impact in the war, and hopefully end this horrible thing that's going on. So I guess cheers to this coalition of Western and NATO countries that are finally giving Ukraine the arms that it needs to end this. So that's my cheer.
A great cheer. And, I was hearing the scuttlebutt that we were about to announce that we were also giving tanks. And there were some interesting points made about, you have to train the Ukrainian soldiers on how to use them. And they are very complicated and, the servicing them and so forth. That it sounds like we could be at a real inflection point here with the Russians. And wouldn't it be awesome if this was, part of the support that was needed to turn the tide?
Yeah, one other thing is we're giving the Ukrainian Bradleys too, and this is pretty cool. One of the guys I traveled with he was a Bradley commander, and Bradleys are personal armored personnel carriers, APCs, but they have big guns on them, but they also have tow missiles. And in the Iraq War, there was one, I forget the exact number, but there was one Bradley that took out like 6 Russian T-72s. And so those even our personnel carriers are more than capable for taking out the Russian tanks. So these tanks, the Leopards and these Bradleys, or the Shermans, not Shermans. I'm blanking on the name.
The Bradley, I think you're right. Or Abrams. I want to say.
Yeah, the Bradleys, ABC, the Abrams are the tanks. So anyway, I think it's just really exciting. You watch all the Ukraine chatter; it just gives them the boost of morale to know that that they're going to be able to one day in the foreseeable future be free of the the atrocities that's going on to their people in their country right now. And I just want to say real quick, this for anybody who thinks, why are we giving this to Ukraine? Ukraine right now is fighting and our number one enemy. We're not spilling American blood. We're not, we're giving, the Marines used to use these tanks. They have them, they've retired them all. So we're not giving the Ukrainians tanks that we would need or we would use. These are tanks that are sitting in storage right now that are being mothballed, that are of no real significant use to America right now, that are going to be used against America's greatest enemy right now in Russia. So it's really a small price to pay. The Ukrainians are the ones paying with their lives, paying with their land, paying with their homes. So it's a small price to pay to keep democracy and American values, and keep in this world and keep us a free world for the people who want to be free. So anyway, cheers to those countries.
Adam, I think your next challenge should be, I'm quite certain we have a tank sitting on Lake Avenue next to the History Museum that's just, sitting vacant. So if you
can Sherman, I will fire that puppy up.
Yeah, fire that puppy up and get on going,
Yeah.
This all is so positive, although at the same token, I'm kind of like, why didn't we just give the Ukrainians the tanks like right off the rip? Like, why, if I were in charge, I'd be like, give them whatever they need right now. But anyhow, I'm obviously not, but I'm glad this is all happening. Well, you guys, those 2 cheers were just so awesome. I feel like I can't do any better than that. So why don't we leave it at that for this week? And just want to remind everybody, we will be back now every week, Wednesdays at noon, live streamed on all the social media platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, we're everywhere, YouTube and so forth. So you can catch us live on Wednesdays at noon or watch us anywhere you watch your podcasts.
Good to see you guys again.
Yeah. And we're almost at our year anniversary. We're coming up on a year.
Wow.
Can you believe
Gang
that?
back together.
Wow.
I know. All right. Well, thank you boys so much. And we will see you all next week.
Stay charming, Saratoga.
Thanks for watching, folks.
Mom.